Welcome to the Rundown. I'm Sunny Galt. I'm a messenger with United Network News. And UNN, United Network News, is the official news channel for CARE, which stands for the Center of Amity and Restoration of Earth. If you're unfamiliar with UNN and what we do, well, the easiest way to describe us is to say that we discuss the real news. We think that's really important. We don't really believe in fake news, whether it comes from the mainstream media or the alternative media. It's really all the same thing. It's all orchestrated by the same people. They give one narrative to one side, another narrative to another side, and then you're meant to believe that these are actual different sides, when really all the information is coming from the same group of people that are trying to control us. So we don't get our news from either of those sources. We get it straight from the source, okay? And if you listen to our newscasts on a regular basis, we talk a lot about that. It comes through something called the Alpha system. And maybe we'll talk about that a little bit more on a future podcast. But our news, we actually have a newscast that's released through our online distribution platform, and it comes out every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So we'd love for you guys to check that out if you'd like. The website for that is unitednetwork.tv. So that is our platform. You can watch the news as well as our other original programs on any kind of mobile platform, as well as like we've got Roku and Chromecast and I'm going to forget all of them. There's like a bunch of logos on the site. Pretty much any of those kind of streaming platforms, you can get our show. Okay, you can get our newscast. You can get all the programs that we release. But this particular podcast is all about highlighting some of the stories that we talk about on the news. We do that through what we call our field messengers, which I'll tell you more about in just a bit. We also have regional/world stories. And what I'd like to do with this section is really break down the story so you know why this is coming out. Why is this making news right now? And you also need to be able to look behind the headline, because there's usually some really good information in some of this that tells you where our world is headed right now. It's not usually just about the headline. It's about really digging a little bit deeper. And so we try to go over some stories where you can do that with, because regardless of whether you're listening to this podcast or, another newscast, whatever, you need to be able to tell what's really happening. So we'll break down some stories today. And then we have our World Situation Report with Kimberly Gogan. And she is from the Office of the Guardian. We'll talk a little bit more about that later on. But that's something that is exclusive to UNN, because there's a lot of things that are happening on this planet and even beyond this planet. And less than 1% of the population knows it's even happening. This is probably the most incredible time to be alive and be here on Earth. And I know that sounds like a really big statement to make, but that's because we can back it up. Incredible things are happening. So the World Situation Report is always a favorite. I don't play the entire World Situation Report, but I will give you some clips from that. And if you do want to watch the entire thing, like I said, you can subscribe, become a member, and go to unitednetwork.tv. But the reason that we have access to all of this is because we have the highest security clearance on the planet. So we know things that the government doesn't even know. A lot of people think the government is like the top, and it's not. In fact, there were many, many, many levels above the government. The government's just right above the people. But there were so many levels, and most people don't understand how, things were structured here on the planet. So we talk about that kind of stuff as well. So, this may come as a shock to a lot of people, especially if you've never watched our newscast before. Maybe someone recommended this podcast to you just to kind of get your foot in the door, get your feet wet, see if it made sense to you, if it resonated with you. But we are going to have more and more people start to realize that something is really wrong here in our world. And what they're telling us isn't real. And UNN hopes to become that resource. So when you start to feel that way, you have somewhere to turn to. We encourage you guys to do your own research, to not just believe what we say on this podcast or on our newscast, but do your own research. Stop believing people just because they're a politician or you think that they've got some power because they're in some political office. They're all talking heads. They have very little power. People tell them what to do. So that really doesn't mean anything. But think critically and ask questions. All right, let's get into it. Here is the rundown for Monday, September 18th, 2023. All right, so let's talk about our field messenger reports. Our field messengers are really what UNN is all about. These are people that are reporting on stories in their own community. And you can really talk about whatever you want. Some of the stories are more newsy focused, right? Some may be focused more on restoration and problems that the community is having that ultimately need to be fixed as part of the restoration plan. Sometimes it's just to celebrate nature and the beauty, because this world, the earth, is just an amazing place. And sometimes we don't see it through the eyes of the people that are living in these areas, right? So it's a beautiful thing, I think, to be able to just, see these stories and know that there's a real person, a real family, or whatever that took the time to just share a little bit of their life with you. So the two stories that we're going to talk about today, the first one is from Uganda, and our field messenger, Mwanda Michael, who has reported several times before, he sent us this video. And, when you do these videos, it doesn't have to be super elaborate, okay? Most people are shooting this on their phone, and they're just telling us a story. They're showing us the situation. You know how it is. If you were like FaceTiming with someone or something like that, you're just explaining what's happening. And so that's what this first field messenger report is all about. So Mwanda Michael was just kind of walking through a village, and he saw this mother and her children, again, in Uganda. And this is a mother of 3. And she's raising her kids by herself. She's got some hardships. It basically shows her living conditions. And when he shows the mom on camera, she still has this bright, beautiful smile. And I think that's what really grabbed me in this story, is that obviously we are all dealing with different circumstances and situations in our own lives. And sometimes I think the stuff that I'm going through in my life is such a big deal. But I am fortunate enough to have a roof over my head and running water and, food on the table, and we're not in lack. My family, that's not our situation. So when I see stories like this, it really does put things into perspective. This lovely mother and her gorgeous children, so cute. You have to see their smiles. They are making life happen despite, what a lot of us would consider living in lack. And I do think this is going to change. Our world is changing, and we are moving out of a period of lack into a period of abundance. And what really warms my heart is to know that there are families like this that are just going to get blessed beyond belief. And I wonder how big her smile's going to get when that happens. So it's very encouraging. So that's our first story. And then the second story is from Nigeria. And our field messenger, Chukwudi Kingsley, he reports on the Igbo land in Nigeria. And his report is about the drinking water. So, this is one of those fundamental things that we need as humans, right? And there are still a lot of people in the world that do not have good drinking water. And obviously that can lead to a lot of different issues, a lot of different health issues. And so these people really rely on catching rainwater, but that's not always enough. And if you've done any, studying of chemtrails and things like that, it would make sense that water that comes from the sky would be the most pure, right? But you have to consider everything that's in the air before it actually lands on the ground. And by the time it lands on the ground, it is not suitable really for drinking. So remember when we were kids, at least I did when I was a kid, I would go outside when it was raining, just open my mouth. And I used to think like, this is the best way to get the water. Why aren't we just doing this? Well, I had no idea that they were poisoning us in like a million different ways. But in this particular story, it's just highlighting how some people live. You know, it's kind of like what looks like a kind of dirty river, right? And kids are going out with their baskets and their buckets and they're getting water for the day that's going to be used in a lot of different ways. So obviously, there are still a lot of places in the world, you know, as part of the restoration plan, we've got to get them really good drinking water, also to be able to brush their teeth and, you know, just do other things with. So this is a reminder of that. So those are our field messenger reports. If you would like more information on possibly becoming a field messenger, you can head on over to unitednetwork.news. There is, in the main navigation, there's a section that says Become a Field Messenger, and we've got samples for you. You can also join our Telegram group, which I will link to in the description for this episode, if you want some help in creating your report. So it's a great thing to do. Show us your area of the world and what's important in your community. Moving on to our world news. I've got a few stories. Let's see, is it 3 stories? Yep, 3 stories I'm going to share with you guys today. So this section of our news is actually a lot longer, but I just wanted to pick a few headlines, few stories, and talk about them and talk about the story behind the story. Because again, when you guys go out there and you see headlines, I want you to be able to really dissect these stories to see what's the underlying story, what's really happening here, okay? So our first story is about a large protest that was going on in Prague. There were thousands of Czech citizens that were protesting, and these guys are upset, and rightfully so. They're upset about rising energy costs, the whole war in Ukraine, and how that's impacting them. They were also encouraging just overall leaving NATO, but the big thing is they are actually demanding the resignation of their current government. Now, if you have studied governments, there's obviously different types of governments out there. So here in the U.S., when you hear, oh, they had a protest and they want, you know, the whole government to resign, that seems crazy to us because we have a president and, you know, then we have our whole Congress system and not everyone just gets up and leaves, right? But depending on the type of government you have, this is actually more easily done because entire governments are created whenever the head of the government is elected, okay? So when they say resignation of the current government, again, that can sound really crazy to people like in the U.S. It's not as difficult to do. Really, you're kicking the main guy out, and with the main guy or girl, then everybody goes, okay? But that's what they want. They are fed up with their government. And what's interesting about this is that it is bringing people together on both the conservative and the liberal side. So it's everybody going, this government is corrupt. We don't like them. In fact, they went as far as to create a new political party that they are calling PRO, P-R-O, to fight this. I mean, they're just fed up. So this is happening more and more around the world. We talk a lot about different protests that are going on, but I guarantee most of this is not being covered by the mainstream media because they don't want an uprising. And it's not that we're encouraging people to uprise, you know, get violent. That's not what we're about. But you do have to put your foot down and stop complying with these people that literally don't care about you. The government does not care about you. Now, there might be certain people in the government that care, but the people that are at the top that are taking orders from other people, you know, you are not a priority to them, unfortunately. And the people have pretty much had it. So the next story is about desalination plants. And I've never heard of that before. These are plants that usually sit right on the ocean. I mean, obviously on land, but right there on the edge where the ocean is. And it converts ocean water into drinking water. So you can actually use it in different ways. Well, a new study or information has come out that suggests that these desalination plants are actually producing what they're calling brine. It's B-R-I-N-E. And it's this waste product. And it's extremely salty, right? Because they're trying to take the salt out of the water. But here's the issue. a lot more of this brine is being produced than they originally thought or were originally told. Let's put it that way. And it is threatening marine life. It's disrupting oceanic ecosystems. And this brine is not just salty, but it has different kind of metals in it and other kind of chemicals. And obviously, we don't want that in our water. We don't want to have anything to do with that stuff, right? And they said in this article that we were basically basing the story off of, it said that it was unclear whether desalination plants were following international standards for wastewater treatment. So I think it's really interesting that these kind of stories are starting to come out. On the news, we talk a lot about our planet shifting from being basically a more filled with darkness to being filled with light and positivity and goodness overall. And we are going to see more and more stories about things coming to light. Like, we've had desalination plants for a really long time. Why is this story coming out now? You are going to see things being exposed because the darkness is going away. So these things, and I'm just going to say it out loud, that were being hidden, like, oh yeah, let's make a desalination plant and let's make, healthy drinking water out of ocean water. That sounds good on the surface, right? But then we find out that it's killing marine life. Like, would we ever agree to that if we thought it was going to hurt anything in the water or any of the ecosystems, anything that's down below? Like, who would agree to that? So I just think it's interesting, and I think more and more of these stories are going to be coming out because, again, this is darkness that is now coming to light, and we have to figure out alternatives, which there are actual alternatives to help with this, but they're kind of pricey. But that could definitely be a restoration project because we will have funds to be able to fix stuff like this. Right now, it's all just kind of coming out, but we have to, figure out, well, what is the alternative? And then implement that alternative. And again, the funds will be there. And our final story we're going to talk about, and I just love this story. It's about shrinkflation, which I didn't even know that was a word. It may not be an official word, but I really, really like it. Okay, so there is a grocery store. It is the second largest grocery chain in France. It's called Carrefour. And I just love them because they are taking matters into their own hands and exposing shrinkflation. So if you don't know what that is, you've all experienced it before. It's probably been the butt of many, many jokes when you're, at the grocery store. But the term refers to companies who are reducing the size of their product, but keeping it at the same price. So the first thing that I think of is not that we eat a ton of potato chips and chips in general at my house, but it is the occasional treat, okay? Have you ever picked up a bag of chips and been like half of it's air? It's like they kept the same bag, but they filled it with air. Okay, that's an example of shrinkflation. And they do this in different ways, hoping you are too busy with your very intense life and all the million things you've got going on in your life to notice that, quite frankly, they're kind of screwing you over, right? That's really what we're talking about here. So what Carrefour did is they started placing warning labels on their products that were doing this. In fact, the label says this product has seen its volume or weight fall and the effective price by the supplier rise. So they're totally calling them out, which now makes them my favorite grocery store, even though I do not live in France. I wish I could support them somehow. And they said their campaign, and they called it a campaign, which I thought was interesting too. Their campaign is intended to get big companies to rethink their pricing policies. Hallelujah. Anyone else feel that way? In our world situation report today, a lot of disclosure. I was trying to figure out, gosh, what are we gonna reveal in today's podcast? Because there was so much good information. Obviously, we can't talk about it all, but we are going to talk about the Black Knight satellite program. And if you haven't heard of that, don't worry, we're going to break it all down. And that's going to lead into talking about the dangers of 5G, which I'm sure all of you guys have heard about in one manner or another. It's like the first thing you find out after you wake up is like they're frying your brain with these cell towers, right? But it may not be exactly what you think. So we're going to break that down for you. Before I play our first soundbite that's all about the Black Knight satellites, I need to tell you a little bit more about what we discovered about who's actually trying to push some of the buttons to make these satellites work. Okay, so bear with me for a second because I need to tell you about this group. If you've been watching our newscast, you have heard Kim talk about the Silent Circle, which is not their real name. This is a name that Kim has given them to protect their identity. But they are a group of people that have been around for a very long time, and they are heavily involved in business. Now, they're not really, they've been kind of involved in some stuff that isn't the best, okay? But when you're trying to restore an entire planet, really what we're looking for, I mean, we've kind of given up on governments, but as far as the people, we really want people that just want to move forward, okay? We're not really interested in like hanging you out to dry for all the previous nasty stuff that you've done. You know, that may require us to work with you a little bit differently as we implement the restoration plan. You know, maybe you're on a short leash, but at the same time, we just want to work with people that want to move forward. And there have been a lot of people in power in the past that have done not so great things. And so the Silent Circle, I would say, kind of falls into that category. It does appear that they want to work with whoever's on top, okay? So if that is the dragon families, if that is the Order of the Black Sun, so be it. What they're noticing now is that the good guys keep winning. Our side keeps winning. And so they are starting to distance themselves as a group, because it's a pretty large group of people. They are starting to distance themselves more and more from the bad guys, what we would call the bad guys, the people that keep doing bad stuff and don't give a rip about humanity, okay? These people, the Silent Circle, seems to have a lot more wits about them, and they are a lot more strategic, okay? Having said that, there is a small group from the Silent Circle that has decided to work with the Order of the Dragon, at least for the time being. We'll see where this goes. But they have actually been responsible for doing and causing a lot of the chaos that we're seeing right now. So the different things that are happening with the weather, starting fires. And by the way, the Jesuits, we've talked about that on this podcast before, they are connected to this group. So we were able to figure out that this happened, meaning this small group from the Silent Circle, they actually had to get permission from the larger Silent Circle group to do this. But they decided to start working with the Order of the Dragon and try to take over the world and cause a lot of, chaos in the meantime. Now, the reason that we're talking about this is not to scare people. It's actually the exact opposite. Because it is more scary to think that hurricanes and fires and earthquakes and all this kind of stuff is just naturally happening. I mean, we've been saying for a while, this is not natural. This is not natural. But when you know more about the people behind it and how they're doing this, it takes the fear out of the situation. And the last thing that anyone that considers themselves to be part of the light needs is fear. That is not a natural human emotion. That is manufactured, and we don't need any of it. We don't want any of it. And when you expose, okay, this is the light shining on the dark again. When you expose that, you take the fear out of it, which is why we're explaining this, okay? So you need to know who's behind pushing some of these buttons on this Black Knight satellite program. There's actually multiple satellites, but I'm going to let Kim from the Office of the Guardian tell you about that. So here is an excerpt from today's World Situation Report.
Well, the Black Knight, black satellites, I should say, because there's a number of them here, are tied to things that you would normally see from like the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse type things. They would be, the ones that had access to these would have been considered the, originally, I should say, because, see, the way the Silent Circle works is like, in doing business with the Order of the Dragon or the Order of the Black Sun, They know, remember I told you they have a lot of esoteric knowledge. They know a lot about how the world really worked, and knowledge is power. So they assume people are going to lie to them. If you're from the order, you're from the Order of the Black Sun, they assume that they're walking into something that is going to be most oftentimes a trap. Mm-hmm. So over the years, they have acquired lots of trinkets. They have acquired not only little markers, they have acquired a lot of things that the order had or the Umbrella Military Corporation had in order to allow them to continue to exist, because they did not do A, B, and C in said contract. Make sense? I told you there's an honor system here. Right. Well, if you want to continue to exist, you'll give us the keys, so to speak, SAT keys to the Black Knight system. They've heard it existed, then they turned over the keys. They also turned over keys to the White Knight system, and the Gray Knight, and the Purple Knight, and the Blue Knight, and the Red Knight, and the Orange Knight, and the Yellow Knight, and the Green Knight, and the Amber Knight, and the White Knight. So they got all of the keys over the years as payment for them messing up on contracts. Make sense? We got all the colored knights.
We did.
So yes. You caught that? Okay. Mm-hmm. Now, these keys were originally given to the Order of the Black Sun, various groups. We talked about Green Eagle, Black Eagle, Gray Eagle, and all of the different factions of the Order of the Black Sun in order to perform certain tasks. And they were considered the Knights of the Dark Overlord.
Okay.
So they were like boots on the ground doing the dirty. Now, they did not install any of this equipment.
Right.
And this goes back to our first lesson we've gotten in altars and keys and right. Okay, so the Black Knight part of it was based on Saturn's moon Titan, which is also a megastructure and not a natural moon. Okay. Which was then also tied to our moon. So we had a plethora of altars and tablets and keystones, and they were tied to several different things. So I'm going to tell you what they are, and this is all going to tie into your 5G problem you have, okay? All right, so the Black Knight was actually considered Death AI. So these are not human technologies. It encompassed all the other access points. So if you had access to the Black Knight, you would have had access to all of the other color systems, okay, which were based on different planets in our galaxy and tied to some other things implanted into the Kuiper Belt, which surrounds our galaxy. So the Gray Knight was actually in control of time. And time not being as you know it, like what time of day it is, it would actually be the disease process. So how much time you get to exist on this planet. Now, this one here is important to understand as we go forward, because if you remember during the beginning of the, let's just say, lockdown period we had, we don't want to get erased here. The lockdown period we had, we saw people installing these COVID-19 boxes into cell phone towers.
I remember that, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you remember that. Now, this has to do with disease AI. So they can actually, and this was the base root of how they can give you disease through computers and phones. Yeah, and I haven't seen this go off in years. So it's been a few years since I've seen this go off. And that makes sense that someone lost access at that time and the silent circle took them and just tucked them away and didn't use them. So the first time that they were used again was probably in the last 2 to 2.5 months, and they were being utilized by the 5 Italian families I'm referring to. Okay, so next, the Purple Knight actually was more of a record-keeping system to those who were the bloodline of what you call Isis or the Dark Mother. So if you were or contained and you were the bloodline or had that dark matter in your system, you would have not been affected by any of these programs.
Okay.
Yeah. Now the blue knight, want a blue roof, anybody? These, well, this is very interesting. So it's called bearer AI. So they are the bringers of news. Like you have a ring bearer in a wedding, you have a bearer of mental, let's just say manipulation. Now, these could send the frequency through phones and any electronics. So Wi-Fi, you name it, they can send it. It would be things like depression, sadness, negative thoughts. Also, these would send the frequency of truth through talk shows like maybe Oprah's or through the news, or this is the source of the underlying frequencies and where they would come from. Okay. Mm-hmm. Now, Red Knight. Red Knight was actually fire AI, so it was tied to and could start. It starts wars. It helps with wars. These are the unknown weapons that you see in those altars. Remember, I said you had to get the altar to fire up. In order to like what happened in Maui. We talked about that already. I'm going to talk about it anymore. Causing destruction, volcanoes, all kinds of volcano eruptions, all kinds of things would come from this AI. And they were possible if you had access to it, because you have access to the altar that controlled it here, which was connected to an altar elsewhere. And then we had one that controlled the ethereal linear chromiomorphic optical hologram of Lucifer.
What does that mean?
Let's see. It was actually a portal for a long time to the underworld. It was a communication line directly to you. Bad dreams, anyone? Have bad thoughts of doing bad things? Whatever it is, anyone from the lower astral wanted to do, they could communicate through this portal.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it was like a Lucifer program that was running. These things, I know it gets scarier when you get into. See, that's why I don't talk about a lot of the stuff that I do within the day, because it kind of gets scary. So then we had the Yellow Knight satellite system. And this one was in charge of supply chains and ensuring famine and lack. So it can do all kinds of supply chain disruptions, droughts, dehydration, so that we don't have crops, all kinds of different things you can do with this lovely little gem. The Green Knight is actually the one. Have you ever noticed when you have a psychic attack, or you're feeling that, how do I say it? You're being affected by even radiation or other things with your phone, or, it always hits you in the weakest part of your body. So let's just say you've had knee surgery as an example, and your knee's not 100% right. It would target that, and that's where you would feel the pain the most. Or if you have a slipped disc, or you have a stomach issue, or whatever it is, it would then intensify that issue, and that's where it would hit you the most.
Okay.
I know. Old wounds, so to speak, even wounds that you might not be aware of from other lifetimes.
Could this affect you emotionally too? Like when I think of wounds, I'm thinking physical, but emotional wounds as well?
Yes, it can cause. Blue Knight was predominantly responsible for changing your moods, depression, sadness, those types of things. The Green Knight, I guess, yes, it could. Like if you were already having a rough time of it, then, I would say Blue Knight would be more of a softer manipulation. So it would be on a mental plane. I would say, if you were depressed, You would all of a sudden become depressed or sad for no reason. You would have a memory of something sad or depressing that happened in your life, and you might have dreams about that. And then the amber one had to do more with the incarnation control, incarnating souls, those types of things, things you were going to bring with you. So if you had other things you have done in other lifetimes, other fears, those types of things, they make sure you want to bring those along. And so it was actually kind of like soul management type thing to the false heaven, obviously not really in use at this moment in time. And then the white knight satellite was just as powerful as the black knight satellite, but it was predominantly used for assassinations, and sometimes of species, elimination, and they were also the originators of all the orders of such things. So each night was controlled by, remember our little lesson from last Wednesday, 6 altars, 6 tablets, 6 tubules containing archon parasites, 6 balls, each with 2 keystones. Then we had crystals, transmuters, transmitters, and prisms. So now, how does this tie, or did it tie, because these things don't exist anymore. How did this tie to your 5G and your 6G? So contained in the orbiting satellites that run your cell phone towers, you have what's called a repeater. Now, a repeater basically strengthens the signal and then sends it on to the next location, which is then your towers, and then from your towers through to your electronic devices. You can also send it through the fiber optic cables that run all over this planet and then on into your Wi-Fi or your router or your television set. But this is predominantly how all of these things caused problems. Why we saw those COVID boxes in the cell towers. It was meant to distribute all of these things to you. So is 5G by itself dangerous? Yes, it has a higher microwave ability than 4G did and LTE and other, because its strength is what makes it such a good repeater. Of course, spending too much time on electronics in general is probably not a good idea, just because, you have, the blue light from your computer, as an example, or the light from your computer that emanates from your computer and your phone is actually just as damaging and aging as radiation is, ultraviolet radiation. That's why people wear blue light glasses, to preserve their eyes and those types of things, and why that's important. There is, the way that we have chosen to construct our electronic world has been in their favor and not ours.
Sure. Yeah.
Yes, there are other systems that can be created which are actually healthy for us and healthy for plants and animals and those types of things. So, but the base root of why it was super dangerous, the same goes for Starlink satellite systems, by the way, that also includes these, had this connection to these different programs. But understanding why, it was so dangerous and why it's not healthy for you necessarily, but it's not dangerous anymore. It's not going to kill us all. Mm-hmm. But when they say that, it's tied to the mRNA and all of this fear stuff that goes around, remember what you're generating when you're watching this stuff, and how that was tied to the altars, the connections to the satellites. Now, these are not normal human satellites either. I want to make that point very clear. These satellites were constructed by non-human beings that around our planet in order to control us and to implement programs at their whim.
So I know when we talk about some of this kind of stuff, it can seem scary, right? And Kim addressed that. Sometimes she doesn't tell us all the stuff that she deals with in trying to protect our planet and help transition us from being a planet that was filled with darkness to a light planet. But some of this stuff is kind of scary. But the more that we learn about, it's kind of reminds me of what is it? Wizard of Oz, right? The man behind the curtain. And then he's like hitting all these buttons. And then like suddenly Wizard of Oz, the great wizard doesn't, you're not so scared of whatever illusion, right, that they're creating. So little sidebar here, as Kim was talking, I thought I'd just Google, which actually it's not even Google. I use DuckDuckGo. But I typed Black Knight satellite into a search engine. And by the way, it's night, like Knight. And I typed it in just wondering, because I always tell you guys, do your research. So I wanted to just type it in there to see what popped up. And this just shows you like how they try to hide this kind of stuff, because you can't completely hide it. You almost have to hide it in plain sight. This is what they do, right? And so I typed it in there, and the first thing is an entry from Wikipedia, which don't get me started on Wikipedia. But it says Black Knight satellite conspiracy theory. They threw out the conspiracy theory with us. Oh, it just drives me crazy. And then it's got some pictures of some weird thing. I don't even know if that's actually what it is, but they've got some pictures there. And then there's a USA Today article. It says, fact check, Black Knight satellite space debris, not extraterrestrial. So what they're hoping is that people that hear something like this, like they see it on some sort of show or something, and they hear Black Knight, then they do a quick Google search or whatever search engine. And, they look maybe on the first page or maybe in the first, few entries, and they see, because it's totally stacked for whatever information they want to put out there. And then they just give up. It was like, oh, that sounded kind of cool, but look, there's multiple sources that are, completely controlled. They don't realize that are saying the same thing. So it must just be a conspiracy theory. But it's not. It's real. They don't want us to have this kind of information, this knowledge. So what do you do now with this information? Like Kim said, do not be fearful. Those programs, that whole satellite system has, been taken down. They cannot utilize it anymore. We're just trying to provide some context for why these crazy things keep happening in our world. And so that kind of stuff should die down now. I mean, like Kim said, there's like maybe 1 week. Actually, I don't know if that was in the soundbite that I played. But remember how I said there was a fraction, a group from the Silent Circle that broke away to work with the Order of the Dragon. Well, they came back to the original Silent Circle group and said, hey, we need more leeway, because they said the original Silent Circle group said, go ahead and do that. But you can't do this, and this. So when this group that broke off, when they realized that their little plan wasn't working, they went back to the original Silent Circle group and said, hey, we need more leeway, of which the original Silent Circle group said, you've got 1 week, and no, you are not getting any more leeway. But you wrap up your little shenanigans, all this stuff that you're doing, and then you come back home, because this obviously is not working. So are we going to see more things happen in this next week? Because it was a week starting last Saturday. Okay. So as I'm recording this is Monday. So it was a couple days ago. So they got like 5 days now. Not a lot of time to control the planet, which of course we know they're not going to be able to do. So it'll be interesting what happens. I'm sure Kim will keep us updated on all that. But what do you do now? What do you do with this information? Well, like I said, you could do some research on the Black Knight, go through, I guess, bypass all the articles that say it's a conspiracy theory, because that's what they want you to believe. And, look up some of these programs, the names of people that we're talking about. Like I said, Silent Circle is a name that we gave them. I don't think you're going to find anything online for Silent Circle, but go down some rabbit holes. Have an open mind. I know some of the stuff we talk about, especially when we say it's non-human, there may be some people that are listening to this podcast now going, oh, I'm out. They're talking about ET, alien, ET phone home kind of stuff. But please bear with us, okay? I used to be one of those people. And I've learned a lot. There were old programs and things like that in my head that I had to let go of. And everybody has to do that on some level. So even if you're kind of feeling that way now, like stick with us. Stick with us. Again, do your own research. And if this did resonate with you, I encourage you to share this podcast with other people that you care about. It's a great way, kind of like little, foot in the door kind of thing, to find out what's really happening on this planet. And then if you want to take that extra step, again, at unitednetwork.tv, you can become a member. It's a great price, but there is a fee that's associated with this. But it gives you access to all of our newscasts. So Monday, Wednesday, Friday, all of those newscasts, which includes all of our situation reports, all of our amazing field messenger reports. And we also have some original series that we've been working on. So you get access to all of that. And if you want to connect with us in the meantime, whether or not you decide to, join and become a member for unitednetwork.tv, you can join us on Telegram, and I encourage you guys to do that. I'm going to include some links below, but there's two channels in one group that I'm going to tell you about. So CARE, the Center for Amity and Restoration of Earth, we have a general updates channel. So sometimes Kim posts on there. Anytime we release a new newscast, that goes up on there. Oh, I forgot to tell you. If you want to kind of just check out the newscast, see if it's a good fit, there are, I think it's 2 hours a day where the newscast is free. And the link for that is in the CARE General Updates channel. So if you're still on the fence as to whether or not you actually, want to become a member and get access to all of our content, that's a great way to see a complete newscast, but you need to follow that channel. So that's the CARE General Updates channel. And then we have United Network News channel, which gives you information and direct links to all the field messenger reports as well as our newscasts. And then if you're interested in becoming a field messenger, which we hope you do because anybody can do this, you can join our UNN Field Messenger group. Again, all the links in the description below. I'm so glad you joined us for today's episode. Again, you are here at a very important time in humanity's history, so please make the most of it. This is The Rundown, and I'm Sunny Galt for United Network News, signing off.